Quince is all about elevated essentials that feel effortless. Designed for layering and mixing, each piece helps build a timeless wardrobe made to last. With versatile silhouettes and thoughtful details, they're the kind of styles you'll wear again and again. 100% organic cotton sweaters, premium denim made with stretch for all-day comfort, luxe cotton cashmere blends perfect for the changing seasons. Everything you need for a wardrobe that actually lasts. Quince works directly with safe, ethical factories and cuts out the middleman so you're not paying for brand markup, just high-quality clothing. Quince uses the highest quality materials like 100% European linen and organic cotton. Everything is built to hold up season to season. One of the big staples of my wardrobe is the Quince Mongolian cashmere sweater. I recommend getting the oversized crew in black and oatmeal. It goes with everything. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/Kate Casey for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/Kate Casey to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/Kate Casey. My mornings typically start at about 6 o'clock, and I'm usually up pretty late. As you can imagine, I need to be running on all cylinders to keep up with 5 kids and a daily podcast. I am always on the hunt for great wellness products, and you guys, I have a great one for you. I started taking the Super Elixir, a premium daily greens powder formulated to support all 11 systems of the body, including improved gut health, immunity, energy levels, and skin, hair, and nail health. It contains a blend of 40-plus whole food ingredients, probiotics, and minerals designed to reduce body acidity. I love that it's gluten-free, and I feel like I do have healthier skin and nails. I mix it with water or coconut water, and I'm good to go. Super easy and convenient. And the taste, it's original pineapple and lime, so it has a vibrant, tropical, and tangy flavor with the citrusy punch that hides the green taste of ingredients like wheatgrass. And by the way, it's Elle Macpherson's daily elixir for thriving through menopause. Right now, get 15% off the Super Elixir at wellco.com and use the code KateCasey15 at checkout. Try it for yourself and feel a difference within weeks. That's WELLECO.com, code KateCasey15 at checkout for 15% off the Super Elixir. 15% off at WELLECO.com, promo code KateCasey15, first time orders only. Reaching your weight loss goals doesn't have to mean completely changing the way that you live your life. What if you could make healthy progress with a treatment plan that included medication, access to 24/7 support, nutrition tips, and tools for tracking movement, hydration, and sleep, all personalized to go at your pace? That's weight loss by Hers. Through Hers, you're connected with a medical provider who determines if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your treatment plan is personalized to support you in reaching your goals. Plus, you can get access to a range of treatment options, like oral medication kits or GLP-1 injectables. Hers goes beyond medication by offering access to ongoing care, dosage and medication adjustments, lifestyle and nutrition tips, and 24/7 support with no hidden costs or membership fees, and with options starting at just $69 per month with a 10-month plan when paid upfront in full. Hers provides access to options that fit your goals and your budget. Feel like your best self again. Visit forhers.com/Kate Casey to get a personalized, affordable plan that gets you. That's forhers.com/Kate Casey. Forhers.com/Kate Casey. Weight loss by Hers is not available everywhere. Compounded drug products are not approved or evaluated for safety, effectiveness, or quality by the FDA. Prescription required. See website for full details. Important safety information and restrictions. Actual price depends on product and plan purchased.
The amazing Kate Casey.
Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with Kate Casey. Now, if you're interested in a true crime docuseries about a double murder, a fugitive on the run, and the unsettling question of whether someone's story has been twisted beyond recognition, then I think I have the perfect series for you to dive into. Today's episode centers on Sarah Pender, a woman that was once dubbed by prosecutors as a female Charles Manson, a label that immediately frames her not just as an accomplice, but as a manipulator, a mastermind, someone who allegedly orchestrated violence without pulling the trigger herself. It's a nickname that carries enormous weight and enormous implications. But as with so many cases that linger for decades, the story is more complicated than a headline. Now let's go back to the year 2000. There were 4 roommates who shared a home in Indianapolis, Indiana. Sarah Pender, Richard Rick Hull, Sarah's boyfriend at the time, Andrew Cataldi, and Tricia Nordman. On October 30th of that year, the bodies of Andrew and Tricia were discovered in a dumpster behind the Teamsters local union at Meridian Street in Indianapolis. Both had been shot in the chest with a 12-gauge shotgun. Tricia was shot with deer slugs, a type of shotgun ammunition designed for hunting large game like deer, one solid projectile meant for maximum penetration. Andrew was shot with a buckshot, which releases multiple pellets that spread on impact. It was a brutal and intimate killing, the kind that leaves investigators searching not just for a suspect, but for motive and power dynamics. Inside the home that they shared, police found blood that DNA analysis later confirmed belonged to Tricia, and there were signs that someone had tried to clean the scene. Richard, Sarah's boyfriend at the time, had borrowed a carpet machine from a neighbor, and the implication was clear. Someone had attempted to erase what had happened there. Sarah Pender acknowledged that she had purchased the shotgun and ammunition at a Walmart on the morning of October 24th, just hours before the murders. Witnesses recalled Hull obtaining ammunition at the counter while Pender paid. That purchase would become one of the prosecution's most powerful pieces of evidence. Now, Richard Hull ultimately admitted that he was the shooter, but prosecutors argued that Sarah had manipulated him into committing the murders, that she was the architect behind the crime. In 2002, she was convicted of 2 counts of murder and sentenced to 110 years in prison, 35 years more than he received, despite his admission that he had pulled the trigger. Sarah had described that night as an argument between Richard and Andrew that escalated while she walked away from the house. And when she returned, she says that she froze. She had admitted that she had made catastrophic decisions, dating a drug dealer, buying him a gun, failing to run or call to police. She has said that she deserved prison time for her choices, but she has consistently maintained that she did not plan the murders and did not kill anyone herself. And then, years later, the case became even more controversial. The detective who helped secure her conviction later stated that key testimony from a jailhouse informant, testimony that bolstered the idea that Sarah orchestrated the murders, was false. There were also claims that exculpatory evidence had been withheld. These revelations didn't overturn her conviction, but they cast a long shadow over it. And for supporters, they became consumed by proof that the narrative may have shaped a theory. For critics, they raised uncomfortable questions about the integrity of the process. But Sarah's story doesn't stop at the conviction. So in 2008, she escaped from the Indiana Women's Prison, and suddenly the narrative shifted from courtroom drama to nationwide manhunt. Convicted double murderer vanished, igniting fear, fascination, and wall-to-wall media coverage. The U.S. Marshals launched an immediate search. America's Most Wanted featured her case, and she was no longer an inmate, she was a fugitive. For several months, she managed to stay ahead of the authorities, relying on a network of associates, former inmates, and a new boyfriend named Tom Welsh, a well-to-do supporter who had been financially and emotionally invested in her during her incarceration, and that is despite being married. Even after reportedly realizing who she was while watching America's Most Wanted together, he continued to help her evade capture. It was a real-life cat-and-mouse chase stretching across state lines. Ultimately, it was a neighbor in Chicago who made the call. In December of 2008, Sarah was arrested at a Chicago apartment, bringing the manhunt to an end. But even prison was not the end of her legal battles. Sarah spent 5 years and 12 days in solitary confinement, a period that she described as torture. She has spoken about psychotic breaks, catatonic episodes, and nights spent sobbing alone in her cell. So acting as her own attorney, she sued the state of Indiana for failing to provide required mental health treatment. She won, and the state settled. A manipulative mastermind who convinced someone else to kill, a reckless young woman whose terrible decisions spiraled into tragedy, or someone whose story was shaped by prosecutorial, narrative, and unreliable testimony. This is at the tension, at the center of Girl on the Run, the hunt for America's Most Wanted Woman. Spanning 3 episodes, the series takes viewers inside both the original murder case and the high-stakes pursuit that followed her escape. Now, it features an exclusive sit-down interview with Sarah herself, who maintains her innocence and insists that she did not kill anybody. And we also hear from law enforcement officers who led the manhunt, offering an inside look at the strategy, the frustration, and the psychological chess match behind tracking her down. The series also includes interviews with her parents, former inmates from the Indiana Women's Prison, her ex-boyfriend Rick, who is still serving time for murders, and others who were pulled into the dangerous orbit of one of the most audacious prison breaks in recent memory. What I found most interesting, too, are the amount of ex-inmates, friends, ex-lovers that all came to help her when she was on this race against time to break out of prison and stay free. So this is produced by Plum Pictures and ABC News Studios. And in this episode, I interviewed the executive producers, Stuart, Cabb, and Tom Pearson. Again, it is called Girl on the Run, The Hunt for America's Most Wanted Woman. And you can watch that on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+. It is a most fascinating story. And we talk about what drew them to the case, the complexities of telling a story where the central figure still insists that they are innocent, and how you responsibly unpack a saga that includes murder, manipulation, mental health, prison conditions, and a nationwide manhunt. Here is my interview. Every year I tell myself, I'm going to get better about meal planning, and every year life gets busy and it falls apart. What finally clicked for me is realizing that meals don't have to look one specific way. They just have to fit your life. That's what Marley Spoon does really well. What I love is that Marley Spoon actually adapts with you. Some nights you cook, some nights you heat, some nights you just need dinner done fast. They've got options for all of it so that meals fit your schedule and not the other way around. And here's what I love. They give you over 100 recipes to choose from each week. We're talking comforting classics to fresh, balanced dishes. Marley Spoon has tons of options in their marketplace, from meal shortcuts and drinks to fresh groceries that you can add on every week. And you can find these in every weekly menu. And you've got a few extra minutes. You've got some great 20-minute options too. And my personal favorite hack, the tray-baked dinners. Literally throw everything on one tray and boom, you're done. And they even include the tray. My favorite recent meal from Marley Spoon was the honey lemon chicken, but my kids also love the citrus kale salad with poached salmon. So this new year, fast track your way to eating well with Marley Spoon. Head to marleyspoon.com/offer/Kate Casey for up to 25 free meals. That's right, up to 25 free meals with Marley Spoon. That's marleyspoon.com/offer/Kate Casey for up to 25 free meals. This new year, fast track your way to eating well with Marley Spoon. Head to marleyspoon.com/offer/Kate Casey for 45% off your first order and free delivery. That's right, 45% off your first order and free delivery. That's marleyspoon.com/offer/Kate Casey. It's a pleasure to meet both of you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So you've got to tell me, how did this story find its way all the way to you?
So sometimes you know how you meet people and you can't shake them out of your mind. And I met Sarah Pender, not sure met's the right word, but anyway, I came across her in Indiana Women's Prison in 2013 while I was making a British documentary for ITV. And she was such an extraordinary character. She had so much energy, charisma, lively, just didn't feel like anyone else we'd met there. And in fact, on the day we met her, she'd just served 5 years in solitary confinement. And I couldn't believe that she was that robust and that put together still. And and so that left an impression. And then the years went by and we were always looking for a moment where life's about timing and people are ready to talk when they're ready to talk. And about a year or so ago, she was ready to take part in, this Hulu series. And that was the start of it, really. She never really left my mind. I just thought you come across characters like that very rarely. And when you do, they tend to leave an impression.
So when you first reach out to her and you say, I'm sort of thinking about this project, what's her initial reaction? Is there trepidation, or is she excited to tell her story and be on camera?
I mean, it was a long process. We had an excellent producer called Rory, who's been working on it for a while. So since Stuart filmed with Sarah back in 2013, Rory's been in touch over a number of years. And I think it's just, as Stuart says, it's finding the right moment in which she's ready and able to tell her story.
And she had to talk about things she'd done a bit of media before, but she was going to go to places that she hadn't gone to and spoken about. And but the other part, which is maybe not as obvious, is that it was a cat and mouse chase, effectively, and you need the cat and the mouse. And that Ryan Harmon, the US Marshal, who's featured heavily in the show, had never spoken before. So impactful was the experience on his life, and that he'd never wanted to really relive it or talk about it. And that took a lot of time and relationship building to get him to a yes. And so I would say neither of them immediately jumped at the chance, but after we spoke to them for a long time, it seemed like it felt right for them to do it. And so they said yes, but it wasn't easy.
What about the others? Tom doesn't appear on camera, but we hear his voice. And then, of course, her ex-boyfriend who is in prison. Logistically, how long does it take to get access to someone else in prison? And then the decision for Tom to participate with just his voice and not his the picture, his own picture or video.
It's never quick, to get an interviewee to tell a story that's as personal, as important as this is never a quick process, and nor should it be, really, because they need to be sure about who you are and what you're doing for them to fully invest and fully tell their story. So it takes a long time. And also there is the practicalities as well of securing the permission of the prisons themselves when your interviewee is in prison that enables you to get in and film with them. But I think the common thread with all interviewees is they want an opportunity to tell their story fairly and properly. In Sarah's case in particular, she'd been, I think it's fair to say, vilified in some of the press reports. She'd been caricatured as the female Charles Manson. And so she was understandably wary about engaging with the media. But I think she saw an opportunity to tell her story at length and in detail, and to fully give the narrative the experience that she'd lived.
Well, let's first talk about her origin story, because on paper, this is not somebody that I think would have been deemed destined for this path. So she's described as this very bright student. She's headed to Purdue. She's got real academic promise. When you began researching her background, what stood out to you about who she was before the murders?
Well, people, she seemed like a bright student that had a good work ethic and was heading into a career in the professions and would have a trade. And, maybe like lots of students, they sort of go for a bumpy ride and maybe don't concentrate on their studies. The thing that surprised us was that, she met Rick Hull, her co-conspirator in the crime eventually. And within meeting him, within 12 weeks, 2 people were dead. And so her whole life had changed in such a short time. It's kind of a cautionary tale of who you let into your life and how you live it. And so I think her path was entirely different if she'd not met Rick. But she did meet him, and now she's serving 110 years in prison.
Was there something that stood out for you in her life that maybe went sideways that predated Rick, like anything else?
There was. She'd had, she says to us that she'd been raped by somebody that she knew a long time ago. And that had obviously a detrimental effect on her sense of worth and her sense of self. But that, I think that had happened. She was already sort of dropping out of college at that point at uni. She already was already finding that it wasn't for her. And she said in the show itself to us, that she didn't get what she needed from education. It wasn't filling her up. It wasn't giving her a sense of self-pride and self-worth that she might have hoped it did. So, who knows? There's lots of an amateur psychologist when you do these shows. Right. You can try and make sense of all of it, and it doesn't all add up. I know her parents split when she was younger. So there's lots of ways of trying to make sense of it all. But, there are lots of examples of people having awful rides and awful lives, and they don't end up where Sarah did. So,
but I suppose that the summation of her formative experiences, as she explained it, is that when she met Rick, he offered her protection. You know, he offered her love, he offered her protection, he offered her a sense of safety. And whilst that was not how it unfolded, that was really what drove her into his arms. And I think, you know, that is a really sort of important part of her story.
When you begin this process, I'm always wondering about filmmakers who are working on projects where somebody has committed a crime or has been a scammer. How do you ensure that this is a reliable narrator, not just Sarah, but the other participants in the crimes? How do you trust what they're saying, and how do you ensure that you don't end up being scammed by the scammer?
I mean, I think ultimately our job is to allow people to tell their stories. And within that mix, as is the case with this series, you know, we talk to law enforcement, we talk to the prosecutor, we talk to the two people accused and sentenced and sent down for the double homicide. And it's about making sure that the audience has the information they need to draw their own conclusions as to the truth. You know, I don't feel it's our job to say, this is what happened. I think our job is to allow people to tell us their account and allow the audience to draw their own conclusions as to what the truth of it is.
Is there a beauty, though, in working with someone else that you can kind of check each other, like cross-check? Because sometimes I would think if you're a lone filmmaker, it could be lonely. But having someone else that you're working so closely with, do you find that that's helpful when you can walk through some of the statements, some of the feelings that you have about how someone's telling their own personal story?
I mean, very much so. You know, we have quite a large team, and it's a good mix between women and men, and everyone has a different point of view on some of the things that we hear. And so we debate it endlessly. We debate it in the edit suites, on the shoots, in the times between. So we bring all our life experiences to trying to understand what happened and what didn't. And we talk to a great deal more people than ever appear on camera. You know, we really know their world. So we spend, you know, months and months and months talking to people that are associated or in their circle or have had some sort of connection with them from all sides, law enforcement to family to friends. But they never appear on camera, but they help us, if you like, to make sure we're not being scammed, as you put it, Kate.
And I think also, you know, there's different people in different parts of the process, as you know. So when the editors are sat with the footage, they've never had a personal relationship. They've never spent any time in the room with the interview subject. You know, whereas for the producers, they've often spoken with the interview subject for many, many, many months. And so the process as it unfolds means that you get fresh eyes, different perspectives, and through that, to your point, there really is a lot of conversation, a lot of debate between the whole team about the process of making the series.
There's also a lot of lawyers. So once we finish, you know, the shows are checked by lawyers. That as much as we can, we're sure of what we're saying, or at least we can know it as best as anybody could know it. So there's lots of safeguards to give you every opportunity to feel like we're presenting the truth as they tell it to us, you know.
How do you lay out the filming? Do you begin at the beginning of her story, or do you find that it's helpful to maybe film in the middle of the story or the end?
I mean, what was, I think, unique and really powerful about this is part of Sarah's story was unfolding during filming without wishing to give it away. So there was the retrospective start of the retrospective part of the story, which you can schedule and plan for. But then there was the unfolding part of the story that whilst you do your best to plan for, you have to react and follow what is happening as it happens. With the best will in the world, and what makes it, I think, more interesting is we never really know where that story is going to go. So you lay the best plans that you can, and you have the best team ready to follow it as and when it happens, and then you go out and you get the story. And I think the mix of the retrospective and the unfolding is a really exciting place to be telling a story, really.
So prosecutors dubbed her a female Charles Manson, which is pretty powerful and loaded. How did you approach unpacking that framing in this series?
I mean, it's a tough one because it's a heck of a soundbite, isn't it? And it tends to stick, and it tends to help juries to imagine what they're dealing with, which was exactly the intention of Larry Sells when he quoted her as that, the prosecutor. But I suppose the end is that, how do you unpack that? That you have to judge the Sarah you're seeing down our camera lens. That's the point. In a way, these series work best when we leave the audience to do the work, and then we go, do you think she is as she was labelled?
I was going to say, I think actually Sarah addresses it very eloquently. The labels, many of the labels that have been put on her are, she feels, because she's a woman. There's sexism in the way that she's been reported upon, in the way that justice has unfolded, in the way that blame has been apportioned. And I really think the best way of unpacking those labels is by putting it to the people that the label has been applied to. They've obviously given great thought to it. They're the ones that have been the subject of it, and they're best placed to address it. And what we really seek to do is give people the opportunity to address it, answer it, talk about it, both in terms of the impact that it had at the time and the ongoing impact that it has on them.
Well, I think that from the beginning, as an outsider, you're watching this person's story, and she's being dubbed as this woman who can control men. And from the very beginning, when you show pictures of her, even graduating from high school, I just see sort of like a dorky girl.
Yeah.
So I'm also kind of reconciling that in my brain, like someone who looks like she's just kind of goofy in high school, and not necessarily someone that all the men would be in love with. And that she's this sort of vixen who's able to make men and women fall in love with her. I mean, when Thea picks her up, it's like, well, Thea's in love with her. And was she ever in love with Thea too? And Tom's in love with her. Was she ever in love with Tom too? So it's fascinating to watch someone's story play out, but I can't get that picture of her from high school out of my head.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, it works on some people and it doesn't on others. I have to say that when I met her in 2013, she certainly had charisma and magic about her, and that it wasn't all about how she looked. And she looked, 2013, she was younger, and she had pizzazz, and she had a really smart mind and a flirtatious nature. And as much as I can say we met in a prison, she was good company to hang out with, and if you pick the right people and get in their lives, the evidence suggests, she managed to break out of a prison by manipulating a prison officer who was trained not to fall for that sort of thing, and yet it did. And she got a whole network of outside cellmates to put their liberty at risk to help her. And so she'd had a history of being able to get people to do things that she wanted them to do. That's the truth of it. Does that make her a murderer? Or does it just make her somebody that was able to get people to do things she wanted them to do when she wanted them to do it, But it's very, I think to Tom's point, it's very easy. Some people will want to believe that she is as she was painted, that she was able to cast a spell that would even allow somebody to commit a murder on her behalf. And you could almost believe it if you buy into that kind of the Black Widow, the female Charles Manson.
Well, also the fact that you even said she comes out of solitary confinement, which was, by the way, like 5 years and 14 days or something. It was a very long process. I've done so many stories about people who end up in solitary confinement and they are never the same. It develops personality disorders. So the fact that you said she was almost dazzling is so perplexing too, because how could one go through a process like that and then come out of it and still have any sort of sparkle?
A complete mystery. I think maybe that's what, I was standing in that prison with a presenter, a host from Britain called Sir Trevor MacDonald, who, was like the Dan Rather of British television news, the most trusted news anchor in the country. And he had the same reaction when he met her. He said, God, who's that? Who is she? It's just not what we expected. And I think she had a terrible time, as you might imagine, in those 5 years, but she managed to pull out of it and become, and put herself together again in a way that none of us expected. So yes, she was dazzling, was probably the truth of it.
But I think also she does speak very eloquently about that experience of being in isolation and how hard it was to keep her sanity and how she could. It sounds truly terrifying, that sense that your grip on reality is falling away from you because every frame of reference is denied to you. And in her case, she had no idea when she was getting out. She started off thinking that she might be in for a year, which in of itself is terrifying. And then it went on and on and on. And I think I think she describes that experience very, very well.
Also, in the beginning, when you showed her coming in and practicing to sit in the chair and the way she's kind of making jokes, I thought, is this someone with a chip missing, or does she have an ability to compartmentalize like an Olympic athlete?
Yeah, don't know the answer. Maybe the second. She's certainly able to. She's got a very robust mind for sure, and she's a compelling person. When we set out to make this series, when you think that so much hangs on both Ryan's ability to tell a story and be compelling and Sarah's ability to tell a story and be compelling, and that they both really deliver, and that's quite rare to see both the cat and the mouse be such characters and be so vulnerable and so able to describe their situations. And I think also I would say that Ryan is an extraordinary character, the hard bulldog of law enforcement, and yet he's bravely willing to go on the camera and show what a toll it took on him, which I think is, you don't see that very often. It's quite rare in somebody that's had his background.
Right.
And to your point, just to say very quickly, in terms of when you first meet Sarah on camera, it was important to us to actually introduce her as something other than a one-dimensional character. She's been portrayed in the media in a very certain way, and we felt it was important to see her as something other than that in the first instance that we met her.
It humanized her, because I suppose if you're doing 3 episodes, the audience needs to feel that they can understand who they're looking at, that maybe in some way they can see a part of them in her, or they know someone that might be like her. And for a long time, she was like a lot of people. She just went to college and she studied, and she wasn't a criminal. And then she was.
It's hard to understand why she would even go to a store and pay for.
At that point. Yeah, at that point, for sure.
Yeah.
At that point, for sure. And, but that's why it's fascinating.
So when you are looking at this whole story, you've got this double murder, allegations of manipulation, you've got the prison escape, the solitary confinement, the mental health breakdowns, the federal manhunt. How do you decide what the spine of the story would be? And then how do you build out?
Essentially, it's really, do you believe Sarah? Do you believe ultimately that she did it or didn't do it? Do you believe that justice is served or it hasn't been served? Do you... What do you feel about her? That's ultimately the question we're asking the audience. I'm not sure we have the answers as the filmmakers that made this. We just sort of put up the evidence for the audience to judge. But ultimately, there's so many contrasting elements. Did she get a fair punishment for breaking out of prison, or was it too much? She's always admitted that she was a co-conspirator, but was she really a murderer? Should they let her out because she served enough time and enough punishment, or do you never let out someone that's been described as America's most wanted criminal? So it poses a lot of questions, and at the heart of all of it is a human being, and that's what makes Sarah's story so compelling. That it's really hard to categorize what the right thing to have done to her is now. I don't have the answer.
And there is really, truly a graveyard of people that helped her evade arrest. But even the people that she was in prison with, are all of them seemingly dazzled by her still? Because they put themselves in obviously precarious positions. Is there, when you stop filming and you put the cameras down, is there still a level of dazzlement, or is it confusion? Because this is a story that the first crime was committed so long ago. So you're weaving in, memory, narrative, shaping, and also survival instinct and trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah, I mean, I think the friends, the people that helped her when she was on the run, those that we spoke to, maintain their loyalty to her. They were helping her at huge risk. She was running for her freedom. They were already free and placing that freedom at jeopardy to help her. And I think they were only prepared to do that because of their loyalty and friendship with Sarah.
Sisterhood of outlaws in some way. Sort of like band of sisters that will do anything for each other because they've all been in the same place. They've all been in prison together. They've all connected together. And I think it's just very hard for us to understand it,
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to ask you if you thought there was like a common thread, like a psychology behind the people who helped her. But do you think it has more to do with the circumstances that they're in, and that it's almost like trauma bonding, that there's a sense of loyalty because there's no one else in the world who would understand the environment that they were in?
I mean, that explanation makes some sense to the strangeness of why, if you're free, would you do anything that would risk you going back to prison? I mean, we wouldn't. We sit here logically going, we wouldn't. If we went to prison, we would never do that. But also you've got to understand that a lot of the people she's dealing with have been in and out of prison all their lives. Like they're not unused to the experience of going in, coming out, going in and coming out. Sarah was, because she'd never been in before. But a lot of the others, that was part of their lives growing up. That was who they were and what they were used to. So maybe the risk is not so big for them. It's not so unusual for them that it would be for us who, if we ever went and came out, we'd do everything to never go back in again.
And maybe there's a level of that. Maybe they feel like that's the only place that they're understood or safe.
Could be that.
Yeah.
3 meals a day in a bed.
Right. Once, Sarah has presented herself as someone who's been transformed, that she's more reflective, she's more accountable for her choices. Did you see any sort of shift in her? I mean, you met her after solitary confinement, but even in the time since then, do you see someone that's evolving, or is it too hard to say because you're so deep into it? It's sort of hard to assess that.
It's hard to know. I mean, maturity comes with age and experience and reflection, and she certainly had the years to reflect. And the reports we've heard from the prison are that, that she's a very responsible, good member of the community there, and she does a lot to help people, and that they absolutely believe that, she's reformed in any shape or form that she needed to. And, we're not there every day. We haven't been there all those years. We're only there when we're with her with cameras to really know how she's behaving, how she comes across. We have to, to listen to the, those in the prison that see her every day in, day out for years. And that they report that, she's a good inmate, that she has all the signs and all the actions of somebody that would come under the term a model prisoner now,
So I read that she got married and that her wife has since passed away. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I don't think we know much, do we? I mean, that really wasn't part of our story. We read that too. We knew about it. We just didn't, we didn't ask it, but we don't know much about that.
When you look in the rear view, what is going to be the part of this story that has just sunk its nails into you? Like, what's going to be the hardest thing to kind of unravel or let go of, or the thing that's going to stay with you most?
I mean, I think for me, and it's an impossible question and an impossible answer, is what is fair justice? Sarah's had a very tough time in prison. But at the heart of it, there was a desperately tragic murder of 2 people. And I think that really is the bigger picture, is what is fair justice. And I think that's something that each person will draw their own conclusions on. But that's really at the heart of a lot of the story.
And I think for me, I just I echo that completely. I think of a wasted life that, having met her, I think, she could have had such a different life and a more positive impact in the world and the community, and that she hasn't. And, the combination of her and Rick Cole somehow led to a tragedy, both for them and their victims and all the people and family that know them. And it just seems like a senseless waste, really.
As filmmakers, is it easy for you guys to kind of turn the volume down and then move on to the next project?
That's a tricky one every time.
Yeah.
It helps when the series drops and we get to share it with everyone else. It feels like a line in the sand. We move on, but you always have continuing relationships. They just naturally drift away because we're not friends. We have a relationship of hopefully mutual trust, and we do something together. And then our lives go a different way, and those relationships eventually dissolve. And I've had that for in all the 20 odd years of getting into these worlds. That's always been the case. But yes, it's not easy.
But you of course you do invest. And you think hugely while you're making these documentaries about the people, the events, that becomes your waking life. So there isn't, and I don't think there should just be a switch at the end of it. You don't just forget and move on to the next project, because I think if you could do that, then you've not really invested in it in the first place. And you often think back to the people that you filmed with, in terms of what's happened next to them.
I think quite often the ones that leave a mark are often not the main players in the story, but are the parents or the daughters and the sons and the people that didn't ask to be involved in any of this, and yet they'll never get away from it. And you talk to them and their heartbreak, and in the conversation I've had with Roland, Sarah's father, and Bonnie, and just that tragedy of watching their daughter grow up in a prison. Not least the victims' families, knowing that they don't have sons and daughters, and they weren't involved in any of it, and yet it's ripped their lives apart. That's always the hardest part to walk away from. That stays with you.
That makes a lot of sense, and really the way that you just put it is even more heartbreaking. Especially thinking about Bonnie saying, "I missed 25 birthdays," because as a mother, your children are the center of your world, and each birthday is a milestone. So you're celebrating what you've created, but you're also reflecting on the person that you've become because of this child that you have had. And so her pain is so deep as well.
Yeah. And I think, in these extreme and extraordinary circumstances, you look for what is relatable to viewers who haven't lived that world, that life. And I think to your point, that idea of not seeing the child that you love on their birthday, anybody can understand.
Yeah.
Roland, her father said, he wakes up every day and then suddenly remembers where his daughter is.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a tough thing to get through your day with.
Well, also, he's probably trying to reconcile what could I have done to have been a better parent so this wouldn't have happened. And maybe there's not even any connection to that. Maybe he was a great father did the best he could, but one couldn't help but think that.
Well, we like to fix things as parents, don't we, for our children? We like to think that we could solve, and the idea that, we could do nothing and it was going to happen anyway.
Exactly. Well, what a story. Appreciate your time. How long did this project take?
We took about a year and a half in production, I suppose, and getting access. But, it's we'd been off and on since 2013, really, with Sarah.
Right.
And, it's just staying in and talking. So, it's been a journey and continues to be one for everyone.
I like what you said, too, I often feel that way about episodes that I do, that it may be a book I read or something I came across, and these stories stay with you. So I'm hoping that you feel a feeling of achievement, of accomplishment, because you had this story that kind of stayed with you and you were able to bring it to other people. When you hear a great story, you want to share it. And all the work that you put into it over all of that time. I just want to say thank you for the work that you put into this.
That's very kind of you to say, Kate. And I appreciate that actually quite a lot. It has been all those things.
I'm encouraging everyone to go and watch and to tell us what they think. That's the most important thing too.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time.
The amazing Kate Casey.
I want to thank my wonderful guests, Stuart and Tom, and remind you to make sure that you click subscribe. Please leave a 5-star review. Join the Facebook group Reality Life with KKC. You can get my list every week of what to watch in unscripted TV, everything from reality shows to documentaries, by going to katecasey.substack.com. Just plot your email address in, and you're going to get it every week in your inbox. Also, check out bonus episodes on Apple Podcast and on Patreon. And also make sure that you follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at @KKCCA, TikTok, it's KKC, and Twitter Threads and Blue Sky at @KKC. Check back tomorrow for an all-new episode.
When you run a business, there are a lot of boxes to check.
Let's see. Payroll? Check. Inventory? Check. Insurance?
Well, Good Thing Simply Business makes getting small business insurance fast and easy. Just answer a few questions, review your quotes, and get covered in under 10 minutes, all online. It's that simple. Check insurance off your list at simplybusiness.com.